Britain's economy barely grows in the third quarter of 2025. China tests the world's largest power-generated kite. And Spain's regulator finds Elon Musk's social media platform X €5 million. Welcome to the Economic Bulletin. We start off with Europe, where Eurostat has reported that Eurozone industrial production rose just 0.2% in September, falling short of forecasts due to sharp swings among foreign firms based in Ireland for tax reasons. Year-on-year output increased 1.2%, matching August's pace. Major economies performed strongly, with Germany up 1.9%, Italy 2.8%, and France and Spain also above average. Ireland, however, saw a 9.4% monthly drop, typical volatility since US tariffs prompted firms to front-load sales. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has welcomed the European Council's commitment to fund Ukraine's needs for 2027. She said the Commission high debt levels could also limit government's ability to provide support in future crises. Buck noted that despite bank resilience, traditional links between economic shocks and credit risk may be breaking down, indicating markets are mispricing geopolitical risk. She urged regulators to uphold existing frameworks instead of loosening or replacing them. Still in Europe, the Office for National Statistics has revealed that Britain's economy barely grew in the third quarter of 2025, expanding just 0.1% compared to 0.3% in the previous quarter. The slowdown was largely due to a September cyber attack on Jaguar Land Rover, which caused the economy to shrink 0.1% that month, worse than forecasts for no change. The motor vehicle sector alone dragged gross domestic product down by 0.17 percentage points in September and 0.06 points over the quarter. This underscores sluggish growth as Finance Minister Rachel Reeves prepares her budget. Still in the UK, Finance Minister Rachel Reeves has revealed that a massive cyber attack on Jaguar Land Rover caused car manufacturing to plummet nearly 30% in September, significantly impacting the country's economic performance this quarter.
The numbers for this quarter clearly reflect what happened at Jaguar Land Rover, a massive cyber attack, the biggest cyber attack that this country has ever experienced. And as a result, car manufacturing fell almost 30% in September. Jaguar Land Rover is now back and up and running, in part because of the support that this government put in, both to help with the cyber attack itself and also to support the supply chain so that that business has now begun car production again.
Luxury stocks have surged in recent months, with Kering up 49%, LVMH rising 42%, as investors bet the sector is emerging from a two-year slump. However, fashion houses now face pressure to prove that third-quarter recovery signs can translate into a strong holiday season, which accounts for up to 30% of annual sales. While new creative directors and slight improvements in China have boosted sentiment, challenges remain. U.S. spending remains volatile, China's recovery is uncertain, and new collections won't arrive until 2026. Recent data shows U.S. luxury spending fell 3% in October, highlighting ongoing vulnerability despite the stock market rally. For further analysis, we're joined from London by economist and political analyst Babak Emamian. Thank you, sir, for joining us here on Qnews. Now, given Claudia Bach's warning that markets are mispricing geopolitical risk, what specific mechanisms should regulators use to force a more accurate pricing of these long-tail risks into bank valuations and lending practices?
Thank you for your question. The problem is, by the time, for example, Bank of England or other regulators collect their data, is usually 3 months behind the curve. And by the time they analyze it and they bring out their analysis, it's like 4 months behind the curve. So you always have that issue with the institutions, whether Bank of England or other institutions, regulators, when it comes to actually predicting what is happening. But the best indicator is actually the companies who are working, whether in different sectors, manufacturing or services. They could immediately tell you what the market is like immediately. But then the system is not designed to actually work or be in communication with these companies and give immediate, everyday news about what is the state of economy is.
Well, sir, now that public debt is at an all-time high, could this possibly limit future government bailout capacity? And does this fundamentally change the idea of too big to fail banks? And should capital requirements be made even more stringent as a result, so that we don't see, the crash we saw in 2008?
Well, if you look at the crash in 2008, it was one-off event. And if you have to go back to something like 1929 to have a similar effect. So this idea of banks cannot be left on their own and they cannot be trusted, it's a very wrong way. It's very socialistic or a very communistic way of looking at the market. Market is the biggest self-controller, is the best way of controlling the market. And this interference by regulators is backdoor to socialism. And the reason why the state of economy is a slow growth, because we have too much regulations. We have over-regulated everything. And the regulators, now they become the trade unions of 1970s. Nobody could attack them. Nobody could touch them. And they are the greatest threat to the reviving the economy, to a healthy economy. The regulators are the biggest threat right now to Western economies.
Okay, Jaguar Land Rover cyber attack single-handedly pushed the UK economy into contraction in September. Does this expose some sort of vulnerability in the national economic security? And what should the core components of the government's strategy use to shield industries like the automobile industry from such attacks?
I think that's an over-exaggerated threat again by politicians. The biggest threat right now to the manufacturing is high energy cost. The UK energy cost is much higher than anybody else. And there is you cannot see in future access to cheap energy for any UK manufacturers. That's why people are reluctant to come and invest in the UK. And if you look at the investment in the UK, there is a lack of private investment in the UK because of over-regulation. So the government has to do the investment, and they call it public investment. So all the government needs to do is deregulate the economy, and you would have lots of private investment in the UK. But Rachel Reeves or Labour government, they don't believe in deregulations. So they have to do the investment. And the only way they can do it is through public investment. And that means taxing people for investment, while there is plenty of private money that can be invested in the economy. But then again, the over-regulations kills that.
Well, with a growth at just 0.1%, does the UK's reliance on a handful of major corporations, as you said there, like JLR, represent a systemic economic risk? And how can Rachel Reeves' budget effectively diversify the growth? How can they incentivize, I suppose, potential investors into investing there other than deregulation?
Well, to do deregulation, you really have to fight the deregulators. As I said, the deregulators have become the trade unions of 1970. And anyone who, and they are mostly controlled by the people on left of politics, because they have become jobs for friends and family in the left of politics. And once you start saying these regulators, these bodies are not necessary, and the market has a self-correction mechanism. Market economy is built over 5,000 years of self-correction mechanism. We don't need too many regulators. We need maybe one or two, not something like 25 regulators. And then that becomes the issue. Again, I say UK is facing the same similar problem that it had in 1970s with the trade unions. Now we have with regulators, and there is no politician brave enough to challenge these. If there was a Margaret Thatcher, she would come and deregulate everything, as President Trump has done that in the United States.
Well, let's, on another note, if we could look at the divergence when it comes to luxury stocks, they've performed quite well. They've gone up 40 to 50%, but underlying consumer data and US spending is down 3%. Is this a bubble, I suppose, driven by the hope for a China recovery, or are markets correctly anticipating a delayed consumer rebound?
Well, luxury market is a very interesting market sector of the economy. If you look at it, it's really about 1% of the population. They rely mainly on 1% of population. But since the pandemic, it has become 1% of 1% more and more. So they're relying on less and less people in that 1% because the prices has gone up and they've become more exclusive. The products have become more exclusive. If you look at the figures, it's a slow recovery, but hardly any of them have recovered from 2019. But then when you see that curve that is going upwards and people are buying more luxury goods, whether it is at that 1% of 1% or the rest of the 1%, it's a good sign that the economy is on recovery, but not for everyone, mainly for the top 1% or later on for the top 10%.
But with the holiday season coming up, even past the 1%, I'm sure there's also spending and buying, even in luxury areas as well. Do you think this may possibly account for the 30% increase in sales, or is this not a concrete indicator of possible recovery, as you said? It's just seasonal, I suppose, depending on what's happening right now. And is this something that can be sustained through 2026?
Well, then the luxury market is not only luxury market. Luxury market is an extension to the hospitality. It is an extension to tourism. It is an extension to entertainment. So we look at it as an indicator, and as we see, it's improving right now. So hopefully, the hospitality, the tourism, and entertainment, and other sectors would improve as we see the signs. But then again, it is the trickling down. So at the moment, there's lots of money on top, and these luxury goods are doing a great job. This luxury market by trickling down, by collecting these money and trickling it down to the rest of the economy. Luxury markets are vital part of collecting money from the richer part of the society and bringing it down to the rest of the society.
Okay, from London, that was economist and political analyst Babak Emamian. Thank you so much for joining us and thank you for your insights. Back to the news, the Czech Central Bank announced it has purchased $1 million worth of Bitcoin and other blockchain-based assets to gain hands-on experience in the digital markets. The pilot project will be evaluated over the next 2 or 3 years. The bank said the portfolio aims to test all aspects of digital asset management, from key administration and multi-level approvals to crisis procedures, security, and anti-money laundering compliance. Governor Adis Michel noted that the future use of digital assets could make it easy to buy tokenized Czech bonds as purchasing an espresso. The CMB stressed that the purchase made outside official reserves comply with Czech and EU laws. In global markets showed mixed performance on Thursday. In Europe, Germany's DAX slipped 0.1%, France's CAC 40 edged up 0.1%, and Britain's FTSE 100 fell 0.97%. In the United States, the S&P 500 declined 1.13%, the Nasdaq Composite dropped 1.76%, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 0.76%. Across Asia, Japan's Nikkei 225 rose 0.43%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index gained 0.56%, and China's Shanghai Composite advanced 0.73%. In Asia, the State Information Center has stated that China's consumer market showed strong growth in October, led by a surge in spending in lower-tier cities. Offline consumption intensity jumped 31.2% year-on-year in third-tier cities and below, far outpacing the 18.9% growth in first-tier cities. The shift reflects a broader transition in China's consumption patterns, fueled by returning youth and digital economy expansion in country-level markets. Robust culture and tourism spending during the National Day holiday further supported growth, signaling a new dual-driven pattern that is strengthening consumption's role in economic recovery. Government data has shown that Japan's wholesale prices rose more than expected in October as the cost of rice and other foods remained stubbornly high, keeping pressure on the central bank to resume interest rate increases. The corporate goods price index rose 2.7% in October from a year earlier, slowing from 2.8% in September, but exceeding market forecasts for a 2.5% increase. Data also showed that while yen-based import prices fell 1.5% in October, prices continued to rise for rice, other food products, and non-ferrous metals. Bank of Japan Governor Kazuo Ueda has stated that the central bank is aiming to moderate inflation accompanied by wage rises and economic improvement, signaling that the bank's goal aligns with Prime Minister Sanae Takahachi's focus on reviving growth. Ueda highlighted that domestic consumption is resilient, with a tight job market pushing up pay and sustaining a moderate cycle of rising wages and inflation. He noted that while rising raw material costs were lifting food prices, a gradual economic recovery was leading to price rises for other goods and services.
賃金はそこそこ上がってるわけですけれども、これまでも
Moving to North America, President Donald Trump has signed a legislation ending the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. The signature came roughly 2 hours after the House of Representatives voted to restart disrupted food assistance, pay hundreds of thousands of federal workers, and revive a hobbled air traffic control system. Trump noted that the shutdown cost the country $1.5 trillion and caused tens of thousands of federal contractors and small businesses to go unpaid.
So with my signature, the federal government will now resume normal operations, and my administration and our partners in Congress will continue our work to lower the cost of living, restore public safety, grow our economy, and make America affordable again for all Americans again. And I'm calling today for insurance companies not to be paid, but for the money, this massive amount of money, to be paid directly to the people of our country so that they can buy their own health care, which will be far better and far less expensive than the disaster known as Obamacare. And I've had, I think, great support. I've even had Democrat support.
Meeting minutes have revealed that the Bank of Canada policymakers emphasized looking beyond volatile inflation figures to assess underlying trends and rate decision. Officials described annual inflation data as choppy due to previous tax changes, but expected inflation to stabilize around 2%. The central bank, which cut rates to 2.25% last month, noted monetary policy is likely close to limits of what it can do to support the economy. Policymakers remain concerned that U.S. tariffs and trade uncertainty could prolong labor market weakness despite reduced pressure from slower immigration growth. In the Oceania region, the Australian Bureau of Statistics has reported a strong rise in employment in October as firms added more full-time workers. Net employment grew by 42,200 from September, while the participation rate remained steady at 67% and hours worked increased by 0.5%. The jobless rate fell to 4.3% from 4.5%. A 4-year high, supporting the view that the rate cut cycle may be nearing its end. And in the Middle East and North Africa, the Saudi General Authority for Statistics has revealed that the consumer price index rose year-on-year by 2.2% in October compared to the same month in 2024. Annual inflation rate in Saudi Arabia remained stable at 2.2% in October after recording the same rate in September 2025. According to the authority, the increase in inflation was mainly driven by higher living costs. Prices for housing, water, electricity, gas, and other fuels increased by 4.5%. Food and beverage prices rose by 1.5%, while restaurants and accommodation services saw a 1.1% uptick. In the energy sector, China's new gold tax policy has pushed domestic gold jewelry prices to a record high above 1,300 yuan per gram. The November 1st policy increases the tax burden on gold jewellery while maintaining different treatment for investment gold. The changes have raised merchants' procurement costs by approximately 7%, leading to higher consumer prices. Industry experts anticipate the policy will boost gold exchange services as customers increasingly trade old jewellery for new items rather than making new purchases. Developer China Energy Engineering Corporation has announced that China has successfully tested the world's largest generating kite, a 5,000 square meter system that completed its first flight in Inner Mongolia. The kite captured high altitude wind energy and transmitted it to ground-based generators. The test marks a breakthrough in high-altitude wind power technology, which utilizes stronger and more consistent winds above 300 meters. Developers plan further multi-kite tests and aim to begin power generation trials by late 2026. Still in China, the country unveiled its future trend in the power battery industry in the 2025 World Power Battery Conference, which opened Wednesday in Yibin, southwest China. The Chinese Battery Industry Association reviewed 10 key technological innovations from 2020 to 2025, including progress in material supply, zero carbon manufacturing, recycling, and life cycle standards. The China Society of Automotive Engineers outlined 8 future trends, noting advances in solid-liquid hybrid and all-solid-state batteries. Over 100 firms, including CATL, BYD, and Daslat Systems, joined the event. Oil prices edged up on Thursday, taking a break after major losses in the previous session as investors weighed concerns about global oversupply with looming sanctions against Russia's oil. Brent crude futures rose 1% to $63.35 a barrel after dropping 3.8% a day earlier. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude increased 1.1% to $59.12 a barrel after a decline of 4.2% on Wednesday. Gold prices climbed to an over 3-week high on Thursday, supported by expectations that U.S. economic data following the government's reopening could bolster the case for a Federal Reserve rate cut next month. Spot gold gained 0.4% to $4,215.49 an ounce, its highest since October 21st. U.S. gold futures for December delivery rose 0.2% to $4,220 an ounce. In the tech sector, Spain's stock market regulator has fined Elon Musk's social media platform X €5 million for failing to verify whether a crypto asset company advertising on its platform was authorized to provide investment services. The fine issued by the CNMV watchdog relates to advertisements for quantum AI that appeared on X. Spanish law requires platforms to ensure crypto advertisers are properly authorized and to warn investors of risks. The penalty, dated November 3rd and published Thursday, can be appealed before Spain's High Court. X did not immediately respond to requests for comment.
It's really the refining capacity that is the biggest choke point. So that's why.
The European Union has launched an antitrust investigation into Google's spam policy following complaints from publishers who say it has unfairly hurt their revenues. EU officials expressed concern that Google's crackdown on parasite SEO may be harming legitimate publisher business models. Google called the investigation misguided, defending its anti-spam efforts as necessary to maintain search quality. The probe under the Digital Markets Act could potentially lead to significant fines if violations are found. UBS Securities has stated that soaring electricity demand from AI data centers will drive a global energy storage boom, with demand projected to grow 40% in 2026 alone. The surge comes as grids worldwide need more batteries to balance intermittent renewable power, the main energy source meeting new AI-driven demand. While the US remains a key market, emerging regions like the Middle East and Southeast Asia may see the fastest growth. UBS noted Chinese storage manufacturers face risks from US restrictions, but should benefit from China's own market reforms and capacity payment incentives. That brings us to the end of our economic bulletin. Here's what we've been covering. Britain's economy barely grows in the third quarter of 2025. China tests the world's largest power-generating kite. And Spain's regulator fines Elon Musk's social media platform X €5 million. This brings us to the end of our economic bulletin, but don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok using the handle @QNewsEGY to stay informed. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates.